It's just a public service announcement. Allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Ho, H to the O-V. I used to move snow.
And now we're diving into an interesting topic this week. As the NBA scrimmages kick off and the 8-game season's about to start next week, and then it's followed right into the NBA playoffs where teams are chasing after a championship. And since the NBA has announced that awards are going to be based off the season up to the coronavirus epidemic, we're going to talk about an award that we think that they should add to the list, and that's the most underrated player in the NBA. And this one kind of hits close to me because the player I'm about to go with is a Wizards player, and I probably watch about 80% of the Wizards games. So I'm from the DMV area. You know, they always got those close broadcasting rights, so they're always on TV, and I enjoy watching them. I mean, they're a top 5 offensive team in the NBA this year, and that's mainly because of Bradley Beal. Obviously, they can't play a lick of a defense. That's why they're 24-40 up to this point. But I want to talk about Bradley Beal when he was first a prospect, since I followed him to that point. I remember when he came out of Florida, he probably averaged about 13 points a game, nothing really crazy. But he became the number 3 pick in the draft because he was seen as a great shooter who has a smooth offensive game that could translate to the point where he could do everything on the court. And flash forward to this point, he's averaging over 30-plus points, over 5 assists a game, over 5 rebounds a game, and he's the only player in NBA history to do that besides LeBron and Michael Jordan. But of course, he's the only one not to make the All-Star game. It's pretty rare, in fact, that a shooting guard is averaging over 5 assists per game. But with John Wall outside the lineup, Bradley Beal has had to do things that he never imagined he would probably have to do on an NBA team. And of course, he always thought he could put up 30 points or score as much as he can. But for him to go out and average 5 assists a game, 5 rebounds a game, and turn this team into a top 5 offensive efficient team by himself, and with just Davis Bertans as the second best player, I don't think he would ever imagine that. And on top of that, Bradley Beal put up back-to-back 50-point night games. He was the first player to do that since Kobe Bryant, RIP to Kobe. And for some reason, he was still left off the All-Star game roster. So just to break down the All-Star game voting, it's broken up into thirds when it comes to voting for starters. You have the fans who vote for players like Taco Fall in the top 10. You have the media, and then you have the players, the peers. So the peers voted Bradley Beal as an All-Star game starter. So he was voted as a starter by his peers. But nonetheless, obviously, the fans didn't give him enough credit because Washington doesn't have a huge fan base, even though they should be a big market. And then it comes down to media. The media just didn't see enough of him because they always weigh down players that aren't on good teams. But that's besides the point. It really comes down to the reserves. So his peers, the players he plays against every night, the players he averages 30 points per game, 5 assists a game, and 5 rebounds a game, said he deserves to be a starter. But when it comes to the reserves voting is done strictly by the coaches in that conference. And the coaches in that conference decided that he was not an all-star caliber player. It's baffling that he can go out and bust teams' ass every single night, but he's still getting disrespected by the coaches. And the Wizards have won about 40 games out of the last 2 years, so they're probably about 40 and 85. And Bradley Beal has carried them to every single one of those 40 wins. He's been dominant. He can score from any point of the floor. He's really became a beast driver. Since when did Bradley Beal got this dunk package where he's dunking on players? I know they got that highlight of Andre Drummond, posterized him when he got traded to Cleveland. You see Bradley Beal hit step backs. He's done that his whole career. He's smooth at step backs. He has the pat. He's crossing players up. He's making players look silly. He's doing it all this year. He's hitting players, some of the best defensive players in the league, with hesitations and spin moves and just catching them and all. And that's why the peers voted him as an all-star starter. But enough about Bradley Beal's disrespect. Rob, who are you going to go with as your most disrespected or your most underrated player in the NBA?
Yeah, Bradley Beal is up there when we talk about the most underrated players in the NBA for all the reasons you just said. And the fact that he didn't make the All-Star team this year, I mean, it's just complete blasphemy. Probably one of the biggest All-Star snubs of all time. But we can't act like this man's been getting screwed every year because he does have 2 All-Stars under his belt. And it did seem like some fans and people were starting to recognize him as the future All-NBA player that we believe he'll be after those consecutive 50 pieces. But because he has those 2 All-Stars under his belt, I'm not sure he can exactly qualify as underrated necessarily. So I got to go with someone else, and that is the walking bucket himself, Lou Will. While he does have the most Sixth Man of the Year awards on his resume already with 3, I could argue that he should have all 5 of the last 5 Sixth Man of the Year awards and the one this year. And because of the simple fact that he comes off the bench, more traditional fans will always overlook his game. And those that say he can't play defense or pass, they're right about the defense, because that's certainly his weakness as someone who is, 6'1", 175 pounds, trying to guard almost always bigger and stronger guys. But he's made significant strides with his passing ever since joining the Clippers. Doc Rivers clearly made it a priority to get Lou Will to get his teammates more involved and improve his facilitating, as he went from averaging 2 to 3 assists per game to now consistently putting up 2 to 3 times that. But when it comes to the game of basketball, defense, passing, rebounding, that's all great, but no skill is more valuable than putting the ball in the basket in the clutch when your team needs it the most. And other than maybe Kyrie Irving and Damian Lillard, I'm not sure there's anybody else I'd rather have the ball in their hands with my team down 2 and the game on the line than this man. Good offense always beats good defense in the NBA, and Lou Will's offensive arsenal is as good as any. Like, everyone loves to judge a player's scoring ability strictly based on points per game, and for good reason, as it shows how well a player can consistently score. But when you take the stats out and you just watch and look at a player's natural ability to score, you really have to put Lou Will's offensive game up there with anyone. Like, the way he can drive left, drive right, cross defenders over, pull up and hit the mid-range, knock down the fadeaway over defenders, hit corner threes like it's nothing, and his shooting off the dribble is second to none. It's just almost impossible to guard him, especially down the stretch in the fourth quarter when it matters most. So while he doesn't start games because of his deficient defense, he's always in the closing lineups in close games, which is much more valuable. And because of his supreme ability to get buckets and come in the clutch, people who know the importance of that and watch basketball see how good Lou Will is. Whereas people who rely on the stats or the public opinion are always going to underrate the man who is a certified bucket. But now that he's on a contending Clippers team, it's really only a matter of time before he hits that big shot that really helps them win a big game and he starts to get the recognition he deserves. So I feel like a common pattern between both of our takes, Brandon, was that it seems like the peers and players who know the game recognize the abilities of the players we're talking about today, but the fans and media might be a little behind because they're not necessarily watching the actual game.
Yeah, it seems like when it comes down to the game, real recognizes real. And these players are playing against each other every single night, and they acknowledge that they're just giving them cups. They're giving the whole team issues, especially on the offensive side of the ball. We're talking about 2 complete offensive players that can score from the mid-range, from deep, that have a layup. And I know Beal has a dunk package. Obviously, Lou Williams a little smaller, so he can't do all of that. But these are 2 players that can really light it up and can really make a difference when it really comes down to the stretch. So I think these are 2 players that are really underrated for all the wrong reasons. But I think they're really out to continue to prove people wrong. And when we look at their career as a whole, at the end of the day, they're going to be really elite players when it comes down to it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said, real recognizes real. And I don't know if there's any more real than Real Deal Beal. But got to show some love to my man Lou Will. And there we go. So lock it in. That's our take for the day. And you can find all Pro Sports takes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, or wherever you're listening to this right now, or even better if you're watching this on Pro Sports Outlook's YouTube channel.
And instead of just listening or even just watching, get involved yourself and leave a comment on what player or what team you want us to make takes about. You can tweet us at PSO_sports and use the hashtag ProSportsTakes. And we'll go through each of those responses and see if we can add some knowledge to the subjects you guys like.
Thank you all for listening. We'll see you tomorrow.